Your phone buzzes. You look. Nothing important. 10 minutes later, you check again anyway. You know it's a waste of time. You do it anyway. Why? You tell yourself it's a bad habit, a modern problem, something wrong with willpower, or with the apps, or with you. But the real answer is far stranger. The urge pulling your hand toward that screen is not new at all. It is ancient. It was built into your brain long before glass and silicon existed, back when checking on your surroundings meant the difference between living through the night and not.
Think about what your phone actually promises you every single time you glance at it. New information, a signal from someone else, a tiny update about your social world. Is anyone talking about me? Did something happen? Am I still safe, still liked, still included? Your brain treats these questions as urgent, not because a notification badge is inherently important, because for nearly all of human history, questions like these were matters of survival.
Picture an early human band, maybe 40 or 50 people, moving together across a landscape full of predators and rival groups. Staying alive did not just mean finding food. It meant staying connected to the group. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying primate social groups and human ones, and he found something striking. As group size grows, so does the mental effort required to track who is doing what, who is allied with whom, who might be a threat. Dunbar proposed that gossip, that endless low-level checking in on other people's business, functioned the same way grooming does for chimpanzees. It was not idle chatter, it was social maintenance. It kept the group bonded, and it kept you inside the circle of protection that group offered.
Being cut off from that circle was not just lonely, it was dangerous. Alone, you could not watch your own back while you slept. Alone, there was no one to share a kill, warn you of a predator, or help you fight off a rival. So your ancestors' brains evolved a persistent, low-grade itch, a pull to check in, to monitor, to ask quietly and constantly, where do I stand with everyone else? That itch didn't go away because you started wearing shoes and living in an apartment. It is still running in the background of your mind right now. Your phone did not create this urge. It found it already waiting, fully formed, and gave it a new object to point at.
Consider how much of your daily thinking is actually social bookkeeping. Who said what? Who seemed annoyed? Who didn't reply yet? It can feel petty, even embarrassing, to notice how much mental space this takes up. But step back far enough, and it looks less like pettiness and more like an ancient job description. For most of human existence, tracking the emotional temperature of your group wasn't gossip for its own sake. It was intelligence gathering. Knowing who had fallen out of favor, who had gained influence, who might share food and who might not, shaped whether you ate that week, whether you were protected during an illness, whether you were warned before danger arrived. This is part of why Dunbar's number, that figure of roughly 150 stable relationships, keeps showing up across such different contexts. Military companies, small factories, even certain religious communities have landed on similar sizes long before anyone had heard of the research. Dunbar's explanation was that the human brain, specifically the neocortex, could only hold so much social complexity before the group became unmanageable. Beyond that number, structure had to replace personal tracking. Ranks, rules, hierarchies. Your brain, in other words, was calibrated for a world with a natural, built-in limit on how many people you needed to worry about.
Here is where it gets stranger. Your phone doesn't just satisfy this ancient urge, it exploits the exact mechanism that makes it so hard to resist. In the 1950s, psychologist B.F. Skinner ran a series of experiments with pigeons and levers. Some pigeons received a food pellet every single time they pressed the lever. Others received a pellet only sometimes, unpredictably, on what Skinner called a variable ratio schedule. Which group pressed the lever more and kept pressing it longer even after the food stopped coming?
The unpredictable group. By far! A guaranteed reward is satisfying, but it's also easy to walk away from. An uncertain one keeps you hooked because your brain cannot stop calculating the odds that this next press, this next check, might be the one that pays off. Sound familiar? Every time you unlock your phone, you don't know what you'll find. Maybe nothing. Maybe a message from someone you care about. Maybe 40 likes on a photo you posted an hour ago. That uncertainty is not a bug in the design. It is the entire design. Your phone runs on the same variable reward schedule as Skinner's lever, and your brain responds to it the same way that pigeon did.
Skinner's pigeons kept pressing long after the food stopped coming altogether. That detail matters. It means the behavior wasn't really about the reward anymore. It was about the anticipation, the small addictive tension of not knowing. Your dopamine system, it turns out, doesn't spike most sharply when you receive good news. It spikes in the moment just before you find out. The half second between unlocking the screen and the app finishing its load. That gap is where the pull lives. Not in the notification itself, but in the question mark hanging right in front of it. This is why silencing notifications rarely solves the problem on its own. The urge was never purely about being told something happened. It was about resolving uncertainty. The same uncertainty your ancestors faced every time they returned to camp after a day away.
Unsure whether everything and everyone had stayed the same. But why does your brain care so much about likes and messages in the first place? Why should a small red number have any pull on you at all? This is where psychologist John Cacioppo's research on loneliness becomes useful. Cacioppo spent decades studying what happens in the body and brain when people feel socially disconnected. And he found that loneliness doesn't just feel bad emotionally. It registers in the brain very similarly to physical pain. It activates threat detection systems. It puts the body into a state of low-grade vigilance, scanning for social contact the way a hungry body scans for food. Cacioppo argued that this reaction makes evolutionary sense. A pack animal that felt nothing when isolated from its group would have less reason to seek safety in numbers. Discomfort was the mechanism that pushed your ancestors back toward the group again and again, whether they consciously understood why or not.
Your phone taps directly into that circuitry. Every notification is a tiny signal that says you are not alone. Someone out there is thinking of you. You still belong. And every silence, every unanswered message, every unnotified lock screen can trigger the opposite feeling. A small flicker of that ancient, uncomfortable question. Am I still part of the group? Cacioppo's work found something else worth sitting with. Chronic loneliness doesn't just feel unpleasant in the moment. Over time, it wears on the body the way chronic stress does, raising markers linked to inflammation and cardiovascular strain. Your nervous system, in other words, treats prolonged isolation as a genuine threat to survival, not a mild inconvenience. That is not an exaggeration built for a headline. It is a measurable biological response because for nearly all of human history, isolation genuinely was a threat to survival. A human alone on the savannah, cut off from the group's collective vigilance, was a human far more likely to be caught by a predator, unable to fend off a rival band, or left without care during illness. The body's alarm system around loneliness was calibrated in a world where that alarm often meant the difference between life and death. So when your phone sits quiet for a few hours and you feel that small, nagging discomfort creeping in, you are not imagining it, and you are not weak for feeling it. You are experiencing a faint echo of a genuinely useful survival signal. Now, firing in response to a silent screen instead of an empty campsite. Now here is the twist your brain hasn't caught up to yet. For most of human history, your social world had a hard ceiling.
Dunbar's research suggests the human brain is built to comfortably track relationships with roughly 150 people. That was your entire social universe. Everyone you could possibly need information about, everyone whose opinion could threaten or protect you, fit inside that number. Your phone erases that ceiling completely. It connects you to hundreds, sometimes thousands of people whose opinions, activities, and judgments your brain still tries to track using tools designed for a village, not a planet. No wonder it feels exhausting. No wonder the checking never actually satisfies the itch. You are running Stone Age software on an information environment your ancestors could not have imagined. And the mismatch is not your fault. It is simply what happens when an old survival system meets a world of infinite strangers.
So what do you do with that? Understanding where the pull comes from will not make it vanish. But it does change what it means when your hand drifts toward your phone for the 5th time in an hour. That is not weakness. That is 100,000 years of social survival instinct, misfiring in a world it was never built for. Your ancestors who ignored that itch sometimes ended up alone, unprotected, and vulnerable. Yours is only trying to keep you safe, using the only tools it has. There is something almost tender in that, if you look at it the right way. The part of your brain reaching for your phone is not broken, it is loyal. It has been performing the same job without complaint for hundreds of thousands of years, long before there were screens to check or notifications to wait for. It watched the tree line for movement. It listened for footsteps outside the fire's light. It counted faces around the camp at dusk to make sure everyone had made it back. Today, it has been handed a device it does not fully understand.
One that offers the illusion of a village, but delivers the scale of a species. And it is doing its best with the only instincts it has ever had. That doesn't mean you owe it total obedience. Knowing why the itch exists gives you something your ancestors never had, a choice in the moment. They could not separate the urge to check on the tribe from the tribe itself. You can. You can notice the pull, name it for what it is, and decide consciously whether picking up the phone will actually satisfy it or whether it is simply another unpredictable lever offering the promise of connection without ever quite delivering the real thing. Maybe the goal isn't to silence that ancient voice completely. Maybe it's simply to recognize it when it speaks, to notice the itch and choose consciously whether checking is really about connection or just about the uncertainty of the next possible reward. Tonight, your phone will buzz again. You'll look, and this time, you might notice something you never noticed before. That reflex isn't really about the phone at all. It's about 100,000 years of humans needing to know they still belong.